Well, Sir John Polkinghome, and there's a name for you, argues because the Christian notion of miracles by definition involves divine causation, it is a theological rather than a primary scientific issue. Science simply tells us that these events are against normal expectations. We know this is at the start. Science cannot exclude the possibility that on a particular occasion, God does particular unprecedented things. So again, if I have a rock and I say, if I let this go, it'll drop, but then I catch it and I move it up, have I broken the laws of nature? Well, no, I've just entered into the normal course of events, and I've, as an outside agent, acted upon that rock, doing what it normally would do when it falls, keep going down until it hits something. Well, hitting something is me lifting it back up. So I've not upended, the laws of reality by doing so. And
or violated them.
Yeah, exactly. That's just saying, well, okay, why didn't you catch all the rocks then? Well, because I didn't want to catch all the rocks. I just caught this rock. Well, I can't test that. Well, yes, exactly. You can't test for that. You can only state if I'm available to catch this rock and I have the desire to, well, then I'll catch the rock and it won't fall to the ground. So it's a weird thing to say that this violates the laws of nature by God entering into and doing something that's not usually normal in the case of things. It's just an outside person being entering in and stopping what would naturally happen. But there it is.
Yeah. All right. So this next section, is going to talk about violations of natural law. It's entitled Hume, Violations of Natural Law and Theism. And he says many philosophers today, though right from various perspectives, challenge Hume's argument regarding natural law itself, right? For instance, the philosopher Richard Swinburne argues against him. He says, if there's no God, then the laws of nature are the ultimate determinants of what happens. But if there is a God, then whether and for how long and under what circumstances laws of nature operate depend on that God. And so no one who believes in historic monotheism understanding of God would deny the possibility of God influencing the system of nature, right? Catching the rock, as it were. Such a denial must be predicated on a priori, right? Prior to our experience, what we assume, denial of this sort of God. Yet as one philosopher observed, Hume appears to have tried to persuade readers to stop believing in miracles without the courtesy of first seeking to dissuade them of their theism.
Right.
So notice that he got it backwards, right? They said, well, first you should have tried to say God doesn't exist and therefore there can't be miracles. But he tried to dissuade people of their miracles without first persuading them that God didn't exist, right? So we got it kind of backwards.
Right. So again, this is why presuppositionalists say, no, Christian, don't put down your Bible and try and argue on neutral ground, because you're not going to be neutral. It's not possible. And by putting your Bible down, you're stepping on the atheist worldview and saying, okay, we're both now operating like God doesn't exist. So now I'm going to show you how God exists. You were already on that platform. Go back over on your side. You don't need to be on his platform. You both have your own platform. You're fine to stay on it as possible. You're trying to convince the other person to come over on your side, not just by default do so. So again, just stay separate until you guys can talk it out there. Well, natural law is a classic concept. It's a classical concept, but Enlightenment thinkers developed it in some distinctive ways. Hume regarded miracles as a violation of natural law, and in contrast to how some earlier thinkers like Augustine, Aquinas, those types of people, and other theorists traditionally conceptualize them. Miracles might appear contrary to nature, Augustine concedes, but they do not appear so for God. For him, nature is what he does. So it can't be outside of nature because God enters into it and changes things sometimes, or stops the flow of the normal course of events, or becomes an agent within nature. So
it may seem contrary to us, but it's not, it's God that catches a rock. That's just what he does. That's not contrary to anything. That's just how he decided to operate.
Right. It's like, pulling a coin from behind a little kid's ear. To you, you know exactly what's going to happen. But to that child, it's this miracle that appeared out of nowhere. Well, okay, yes, depending on who the observer is there. Well, until the 16th century or later, miracles were not defined with regard to natural law. Indeed, Isaac Newton, some of whose approach influenced Hume, did not define miracles as violation of natural law. Again, what Hume did is he poisoned the well right at the start and said, this is what a miracle is. It's a violation of the natural law. Well, okay, that's not how anyone defines it. Yeah, but I'm going to set that up and I'm going to poke some holes into it. I keep forgetting what we call that, but it seems like almost a scarecrow that you may light on fire at times, and no one's wanting to go to the scarecrow rather than present the actual case of what they are claiming here.
And so Keener kind of presses this point, right? He says those who Hume opposed in his essay did not view miracles as violations of natural law, and nearly all his critics protested, Hume's characterization of miracles as a violation of natural laws. Why? Well, why did they believe that miracles were not violations? Well, they would argue something like this: one violates a law only to which one is subject. So the language would not be consistent with theistic premises. God is not subject to the laws of nature. He created them, right? So that since he's not subject to him, he doesn't violate them. Only a person who's subject to him is the one that violates, right? And so the image of a punitive deity's subordination to natural law is inconsistent with traditional monotheistic conceptions, thus excluding theists from the conversation at the very beginning, right? So even when it appears that God works otherwise, one would speak of violation technically only if one viewed God as subject to such laws or interfering, right, as if nature were autonomous and God did not normally act there. God doesn't interfere with nature, right? He just does what he does, right? And he's not subject to nature. So he doesn't violate nature. He just does what he does.
Right. And so it's why we can say, okay, I have two rocks. They're both round. And all of a sudden, it appears that another rock has come into play, and now I have three rocks when I had two before. That's weird. But to say that those round rocks have four sides and therefore they're still round, that itself would be both sides would agree would be a violation of philosophy of the way God thinks. And so we know that, again, can't make the squares or the circle square in that regard, but that's because how logic works, how the laws of logic work is a characteristic of God. So that's why you can say, well, we know it's not possible for God to create a square circle, but it's not outside the possibility that says that God can't add another rock to our pile. He's just not subject to the laws of nature in that way.